Imagine holding in your hand a coin that not only represents a small piece of American currency, but also carries with it a layered history of design, production, economy, and culture. The Washington quarter of 1979 is one such coin that continues to fascinate collectors. Historians and everyday people who stumble upon it in their pocket change the story of the 1979 quarter is deeply rooted in the origins of the Washington quarter series itself, which began in 1932 when the United States was celebrating the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. At that time, the government and the Treasury Department wanted to honor the nation's first president, and the coin that was chosen for this honor was the quarter dollar. The design that was selected came from sculptor John Flanagan, who based his portrait on Jean-Antoine Houdon's 18th-century bust of George Washington. The design featured Washington's profile facing left, the word liberty arched above. His head, the motto, "In God We Trust," positioned to the left, and the date of issue displayed prominently beneath Washington's portrait on the reverse. Flanagan created a heraldic eagle design based loosely on earlier American emblems. This eagle, with outstretched wings perched upon a bundle of arrows with two olive branches below, became one of the most enduring images in American coinage. By 1979, the Washington quarter had already been circulating for nearly 5 decades. Yet the late 1970s were a significant time in the broader context of U.S. coinage and economics. The United States was experiencing high inflation, fluctuating precious metal prices, and a changing role for coinage in daily commerce. The quarter remained one of the most commonly used denominations, especially as vending machines, parking meters, and public telephones increasingly relied on it. The 1979 quarter was produced at 3 major U.S. mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each mint contributing millions of pieces to meet the growing demand in circulation. The Philadelphia Mint struck coins without a mint mark, while the Denver Mint used the familiar D mint mark, and San Francisco produced proof coins bearing the S mark intended primarily for collectors, the mintage numbers for 1979. Washington quarters reflect both the economic needs of the time and the ongoing production capabilities of the mint. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 600 million quarters, while Denver produced nearly 500 million, and the San Francisco Mint struck several million proof coins. The high mintage totals demonstrate just how essential the quarter was in circulation during this period, but they also mean that most 1979 quarters remain common in circulated condition. However, within this mass production, there exist certain varieties and striking differences that continue to attract the attention of numismatists. One of the most notable aspects of late 1970s and early 1980s quarters is the quality of the strikes. Collectors often note that the details of Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers vary considerably depending on the die state and production quality of each mint. When examining the cultural and historical significance of the 1979 quarter, it is important to look beyond its surface design and production numbers and consider the broader narrative in which this coin participated. The United States in 1979 was a country dealing with economic challenges, high energy prices, international tensions, and domestic debates over inflation and wages. Everyday Americans felt the pinch of rising costs, and their pocket change became a direct reflection of the nation's struggles. The quarter remained a vital tool for daily transactions, and its presence in people's lives was constant, whether used in laundromats, arcade machines, or payphones. The Washington quarter of 1979 symbolized stability in a time of change. The San Francisco Mint's proof coins from 1979 are particularly notable for their craftsmanship. Proof coins are not meant for circulation, but rather for collectors, and they are struck multiple times with specially prepared dies to create sharp details and mirrored surfaces. The 1979 proof quarters with the S mint mark were sold in proof sets, and while not considered rare, they hold special value to collectors who appreciate the artistry and higher quality of these coins. Numismatic specialists often differentiate between cameo and deep cameo examples, with the latter exhibiting frosted design elements that contrast beautifully with the mirror-like background fields. Another dimension to the 1979 quarter story lies in the transition of mint mark styles during this era, particularly at the San Francisco Mint, where a change occurred in the style of the S mint mark, creating varieties such as the Type 1 and Type 2 proofs. The Type 1 S mint mark appears more filled or blobby, while the Type 2 is clearer and sharper collectors. Seek out these differences and assign premiums accordingly. This kind of subtle distinction reveals just how much depth can be found. Even in coins that were produced in the millions, every small variation becomes a historical marker telling us about the minting technology, quality control, and design decisions of the time. The Washington quarter itself continued unchanged in major design elements until the late 1990s, but the 1979 issue serves as a bridge between earlier decades of traditional coinage and the changes that would come with the state quarters program starting in 1999. For many Americans, the Washington quarter of 1979 was simply pocket change. Yet today, for those who study coins, it offers insights into American life. In the late 20th century, its commonness in circulation masks the intricate stories hidden within die varieties, proof distinctions, and minting practices. Collectors often reflect on the condition of 1979 quarters, with those graded in mint state or proof-like condition commanding higher values than well-circulated examples. The grading system developed by the numismatic community plays a crucial role in how these coins are appraised, with top-quality specimens earning significant premiums. The artistry of Flanagan's design, when fully struck and preserved in pristine condition, can be truly striking. The fine lines of Washington's hair, the sharpness of the eagle's feathers, and the clarity of the inscriptions combine to create an enduring reminder of America's numismatic heritage. Thus, the Washington quarter of 1979, while seemingly ordinary, is far from simple. It embodies decades of tradition, honors. The legacy of George Washington reflects the economic and cultural context of its time and presents collectors with endless opportunities for study and discovery, from its origins in the bicentennial celebrations of 1932 to its production in the challenging economic climate of 1979. This coin weaves together threads of history, art, politics, and daily life. Its presence in millions of pockets across America was a silent witness to an era, and today it continues to hold a place in the collections and imaginations of those who seek to understand the story of America through its coinage. The story of the 1980 Washington quarter is far more than just a piece of metal with a face on one side and an eagle on the other. It is a story of American heritage, economic change, and numismatic tradition, all wrapped into a coin that millions of people carried in their pockets, yet only a fraction of them ever truly understood. When you hold a 1980 Washington quarter, you are not just holding 25 cents of legal tender. You are holding a continuation of a design legacy that stretches back to the early 1930s. And a time when the United States wanted to honor its first president, George Washington, with a coin that would symbolize strength, unity, and leadership. The Washington Quarter series began in 1932, created to mark the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth, and the design chosen by the Treasury Department was the work of sculptor John Flanagan, who crafted an image of Washington based on the famous bust by French artist Jean-Antoine Houdon. That likeness would remain on the coin for decades with only subtle adjustments. And by the year 1980, the Washington quarter had already been in circulation for nearly 50 years, carrying forward a sense of continuity through wars, recessions, and social changes. Now, by 1980, the American economy was facing a time of high inflation, rising interest rates, and shifting global trade markets. The value of money was being tested in new ways, and the quarter coin remained a critical part of everyday commerce in vending. Machines, parking meters, toll booths, and cash registers everywhere. The 1980 Washington quarter itself was struck in two major minting facilities, Philadelphia and Denver, with coins bearing no mint mark for Philadelphia and the D mint mark for Denver. The San Francisco Mint also produced proof coins for collectors, which were struck with sharp details and mirror-like finishes, making them prized among numismatists. The Philadelphia Mint in 1980 was in fact one of the busiest facilities in the world, producing billions of coins to meet the growing demand of the American public, and the 1980 Washington quarter played its part in keeping the economy flowing smoothly. The composition of the 1980 Washington quarter was the same as the post. 1965 clad coins consisting of an outer layer of copper nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This was a significant change from the earlier silver quarters that had been minted prior to 1965, when the Coinage Act of 1965 removed silver from dimes, and quarters in response to rising silver prices. The clad composition gave the coin a distinctive look and feel, with a more durable surface that could withstand heavy circulation. By 1980, the clad Washington quarter had already been in circulation for 15 years, and Americans had fully adjusted to the disappearance of silver, though collectors still cherished the older 90% silver quarters. When examining the design details of the 1980 quarter, the obverse, or front of the coin, retained John Flanagan's portrait of George Washington, his profile facing left with the word Liberty above his head and the motto, "In God We Trust." Placed to the left of his portrait beneath the neck, one would find the date 1980 marking the year of minting. On the reverse, the American eagle was still in full display, wings outstretched, clutching arrows, symbolizing readiness for defense, while standing above olive branches that symbolized peace. The words United States of America arched above. The eagle with the denomination $quarter inscribed below this design was simple, strong, and symbolic, making it one of the most enduring designs in American coinage. The 1980 Washington quarter also carried with it the subtle historical importance of being produced right before a major shift in American coin collecting. In 1982, the U.S. Mint eliminated mint marks from Philadelphia coins for a brief period, resulting in the famous 1982 No-P quarter. This makes the 1980 Philadelphia quarter one of the last standard P-less quarters before that dramatic shift. Another aspect that adds depth to the 1980 issue is its place in the larger historical timeline of Washington quarters, which by the 1990s would undergo the 50-state quarters program. A revolution in coin collecting that began in 1999 and forever changed the way Americans viewed their pocket change collectors today. Look back at the 1980 quarter as both common and yet significant billions were minted, which makes it a readily available coin in circulated condition. But for those who seek high-grade uncirculated examples or proof versions, the 1980 quarter can become a desirable addition to a serious collection. Mint state, coins graded MS-65 and above are particularly appealing because they capture the fine details of Flanagan's artistry without the heavy wear that most quarters endure in circulation-proof versions. Especially those struck in San Francisco stand out with their mirror-like fields and frosted devices, giving Washington's profile and the eagle on the reverse a striking contrast that regular business strikes cannot match. Beyond the coin itself, the 1980 Washington quarter reflects the culture and history of the late 1970s and early 1980s, an era of technological growth, the dawn of the computer age, the Cold War tensions with the Soviet Union, and a struggling American economy. Coins from this period become silent witnesses to the transactions that shaped people's daily lives, whether it was buying a newspaper from a corner stand or using a payphone, which often required a quarter. The coin was everywhere, and its design reminded every American of the nation's founding father, George Washington, a symbol of resilience at a time when the country was pushing through challenges. As we dive deeper into the world of the 1980 Washington quarter, we see how every aspect of its production, distribution, and circulation tells a story, from the minting technology employed at the time to the engraver's dedication to preserving the classical portrait of Washington, from the changes in metallic composition that mirrored the economic realities of the 20th century to the collector values that grew around proof coins and mint. State survivors. This quarter serves as an entry point into a much larger narrative about American history, economy, and culture. So when you think of the 1980 Washington quarter, do not just see it as a simple coin worth 25 cents. Think of it as a time capsule from 1980, a year when the United States was wrestling with inflation, when the Washington quarter continued its role as an everyday workhorse coin, when the mint worked tirelessly to produce millions of coins to keep commerce moving, when collectors began to recognize that even common dates had stories worth telling, and when the portrait of George Washington remained an enduring symbol of leadership, strength, and continuity in American coinage. This is the true depth behind the coin that most people barely glance at, and yet it carries within it a story worthy of hours of exploration. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of metal that has traveled through time, carrying with it the legacy of America's first president, the struggles of a nation, and the craftsmanship of the United States Mint. Now imagine that this coin, minted in 1981, is more than just loose change, but rather a story of artistry, economics, politics, and culture. This is not simply a Washington quarter, it is a window into the fabric of American life during one of the most fascinating transitional decades of the 20th century. And today we will unfold the complete professional history of the 1981 Washington quarter in a way that reveals its hidden significance, its production details, and its role in the larger narrative of coinage in the United States. The Washington Quarter series began in 1932 when the United States sought to honor the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. The design selected by the Treasury Department featured the portrait of George Washington created by sculptor John Flanagan, based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's famous bust of Washington from 1785. The obverse of the coin displayed this portrait with the word "Liberty" arched above the president's head, the phrase "In God We Trust" placed just to the left, and the date of minting shown at the bottom. The reverse design featured a heraldic eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows, symbolizing strength and preparedness, with olive branches beneath, representing the desire for peace. This design would remain in use for decades, becoming a central icon of American coinage and forming part of everyday life for generations of citizens. By 1981, the Washington quarter had already been in production for nearly half a century, and during those years, it had undergone significant historical transitions. One of the most important changes came in 1965, when rising silver prices forced the United States Mint to abandon its traditional 90% silver composition quarters. Minted from 1965 onward, including those produced in 1981, were made of a copper-nickel-clad composition consisting of an inner core of pure copper bonded between outer layers of a copper-nickel alloy that gave the coin its familiar silvery appearance. This adjustment not only ensured the continued affordability of producing quarters, but also reflected larger economic shifts in America during the mid-20th century. The year 1981 itself was significant in American history as the nation experienced economic turbulence, high inflation, and political change with Ronald Reagan's presidency. Beginning that year, coins minted in this period, including the Washington quarter of 1981, can be seen as symbolic artifacts of the times they were produced. At 3 different mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each playing a role in the distribution of currency across the nation. Philadelphia and Denver struck business strike coins intended for circulation, while San Francisco focused on proof coinage struck with extraordinary detail and mirror-like finishes for collectors. Business strike quarters from Philadelphia in 1981 carried no mint mark, a tradition that had persisted until 1980, when the P mint mark was first introduced. Interestingly, the The 1981 Philadelphia quarters still followed the older style with no mint mark, distinguishing them from Denver coins which carried the letter D below Washington's hair ribbon. San Francisco proof coins bore the familiar S mint mark, but 1981 proofs are notable because the San Francisco Mint was transitioning from traditional Type 1 mint mark punches to a refined Type 2 style. The earlier Type 1S was more rounded and blobby, while the later Type 2S appeared clearer and sharper, making the 1981 proof sets highly collectible due to the presence of both varieties. The production numbers of the 1981 quarters were immense. As the demand for coinage in circulation was high, Philadelphia struck over 700 million pieces. Denver produced over 500 million, while San Francisco issued millions of proof coins for collectors. However, despite these large mintages, quality varied considerably, with circulation strikes often showing weak details or bag marks caused by mass-handling collectors, therefore prize examples with sharp strikes, minimal marks, and strong luster, particularly from original rolls or mint sets. Examining the coin itself, the obverse retained John Flanagan's original portrait, though. By 1981, decades of repeated use of the dies had softened many of the finer details in Washington's hair and facial features. The relief was somewhat lower than earlier strikes, making the coins look less sharp when compared to quarters from the 1930s and 1940s on the reverse. The eagle design continued to hold strong symbolism, yet similar wear in the die hubs meant that feather details and other elements could appear weaker unless struck from fresh dies within the numismatic community. The 1981 Washington quarter holds value not only for its role in everyday commerce, but also as part of the larger study of die varieties minting technology. And the evolution of American coinage specialists often study the differences between business strike and proof strike coins, the sharpness of the mint mark varieties, and even minor die errors that can occur during production. Doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and off-center strikes have all been documented for quarters of this era, and such pieces command premiums in the collector market. Furthermore, the 1981 Washington quarter is situated historically as one of the last issues before major design changes would reshape the quarter series beginning in 1999 with the State Quarters program, which introduced 50 new designs over a 10-year span for many collectors. The coins of the 1980s, including the 1981 issue, represent the final years of the classic eagle reverse before America shifted toward a new era of artistic and commemorative coinage. Looking deeper into the cultural context of 1981, the Washington quarter circulated heavily during a time when cash transactions dominated American life. The average citizen would carry quarters for payphones, vending machines, laundromats, parking meters, and arcade games, making the quarter one of the most widely used denominations in daily routines. The presence of the 1981 Washington quarter in circulation meant that millions of people handled these coins without giving much thought to the legacy of Washington himself or the mint's craftsmanship, yet each piece silently connected them to a history stretching back nearly 50 years. The proof sets of 1981 hold a particularly important place in numismatic history, because they were offered during a time when the mint was modernizing its proof coinage production techniques. Beginning in the late 1970s and into the early 1980s, the mint refined the polishing of dies and planchets to create sharper contrasts. Between frosted design elements and mirrored backgrounds, the 1981 proof Washington quarters reflect this experimentation and development, making them attractive not only for their beauty, but for their technological significance. In conclusion, the 1981 Washington quarter may seem like an ordinary piece of pocket change, but it carries with it a long professional history, stretching back to the creation of the Washington quarter series in 1932, reflecting the major changes in coin composition that occurred in 1965, embodying the economic and political spirit of America in 1981, and foreshadowing the eventual transformation of the quarter into a vehicle for widespread state and commemorative designs for the dedicated numismatist, the 1981 quarter offers endless avenues of study from mint marks and proof varieties to strike quality and die errors. And for the casual collector or history enthusiast, it remains a tangible piece of the American story. A coin that continues to teach us about the past through its enduring presence in the present. Imagine holding in your hand a simple piece of American change, something you may pass along in a store without a second thought. Yet within that coin lies a story of artistry, history, economics, and national pride. The Washington quarter of 1987 is one such coin. And today we unravel its complete history in detail, a history so rich that by the end of this journey, you will never look at a quarter the same way again. The Washington Quarter series itself began in 1932 as a tribute to George Washington, the first president of the United States, marking the bicentennial of his birth. John Flanagan's design, featuring Washington's left-facing portrait, was selected and would become one of the most enduring designs in American coinage. The 1987 quarter belongs to that historic lineage, continuing the design that had by then become a fixture in pockets, purses, and cash registers across America. The obverse of the 1987 quarter bears the iconic image of Washington modeled after the bust created in 1785 by French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon, a design choice that was intended to capture the authentic likeness of the man who shaped the foundation of the nation. Above his portrait, the word "Liberty" is engraved, reminding Americans of the ideals upon which the country was built. To the left, the national motto, "In God We Trust," is etched firmly, standing as a declaration of faith and tradition, while beneath the portrait, the year 1987 is placed, a marker of time that roots the coin in its specific historical context. Turning to the reverse, the 1987 quarter features the heraldic eagle with outstretched wings, clutching arrows, and an olive branch, a classic symbol of American power and peace designed to represent the nation's balance between military readiness and its dedication to diplomacy. The inscriptions "United States of America" and "E Pluribus Unum," together with the denomination $quarter, create a message of national identity, unity, and value. This design had been in place since the coin's first release, and in 1987, it continued to project the values of a nation that was experiencing significant economic, political, and cultural transformations. The year 1987 was notable in the history of the United States. The country was in the later years of the Reagan presidency, and the economy was marked by both booming growth and looming challenges, with events such as the stock market crash in October that year, reminding Americans of financial uncertainty. The Washington quarter of 1987 circulated in this climate, moving from hand to hand as people bought goods, paid for services, and saved change. It became part of everyday life, a silent witness to the realities of the American people. From a numismatic perspective, the 1987 Washington quarter was produced at multiple mints, primarily the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the absence of a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, identified by the D mark placed to the right of Washington's ponytail. The San Francisco Mint also struck proof coins for collectors carrying the S mint mark. These proof issues were of higher quality, struck on specially prepared planchets with polished dies, producing sharp details and mirrored finishes appealing to coin collectors who valued them both for their beauty and their role in completing proof sets. The composition of the 1987 quarter continued the clad standard that had been adopted in 1965 following the Coinage Act, which removed silver from circulating quarters due to rising silver prices. Instead, the coins were made of a copper-nickel-clad sandwich structure with outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This change, which had been controversial in the mid-1960s, was by 1987 fully accepted by the public, though collectors always remembered the beauty and intrinsic value of the pre-1965 silver quarters. The 1987 issue represented the modern practical reality of United States coinage, a balance Between affordability, durability, and circulation needs, in terms of mintage numbers, the Philadelphia and Denver mints each produced hundreds of millions of quarters in 1987, ensuring widespread circulation across the nation. The San Francisco Mint struck smaller numbers of proof coins, specifically intended for inclusion in collector sets as such, while the vast majority of 1987 quarters hold only face value today in circulated condition. Higher-grade uncirculated examples or pristine proof coins can command premiums in the numismatic marketplace. The true value for collectors often lies not only in the monetary worth, but in the condition, rarity, and historical narrative tied to each coin. The design of the Washington quarter in 1987 remained unchanged, but its longevity was a subject of debate within the numismatic community. Some believed it was time to update the design, as the coin had been circulating for over 5 decades. Others argued that the Washington portrait and eagle reverse had become iconic symbols too deeply rooted in American culture to be replaced indeed. The Washington quarter design would persist for another decade before the 50-state quarters program launched in 1999, bringing dramatic changes to the reverse designs and capturing the imagination of millions of Americans. The 1987 quarter therefore represents a late chapter in the long-running original Washington quarter series that stretched from 1932 to 1998, examining the cultural role of the quarter in 1987 also reveals fascinating insights. By that time, vending machines, arcade games, and payphones all relied heavily on quarters as the standard unit of operation. This gave the coin an outsized importance in daily life beyond its face value. A single quarter could grant you a phone call, a video game, a snack from a machine, or even serve as the deciding coin flip in moments of chance and decision-making. The 1987 Washington quarter, therefore, was not only a piece of money, but also an essential token of American culture woven into the fabric of social and economic interactions. Collectors today often seek the 1987 quarter in high mint state grades, where luster, sharp strike, and absence of wear elevate the coin's beauty. Such coins may come from original bankrolls, mint sets, or proof sets, and finding pristine examples can be a rewarding pursuit for numismatists who value condition rarity and the connection to American history. Some error coins from the year, such as off-center strikes, double dies, or clipped planchets, add an extra layer of intrigue and can be far more valuable than regular issues, providing collectors with exciting challenges in their search to truly appreciate the 1987 Washington. Quarter one must see it as more than a small piece of metal. It is a reflection of American heritage, the continuation of a design that honored the founding father George Washington, the embodiment of national symbols like the eagle and the mottos of unity and faith, and a participant in the everyday lives of millions of Americans during a year of economic turbulence and cultural change. It is a bridge between the silver era of the past and the modern clad coinage era that still defines U.S. quarters today. When you hold a 1987 Washington quarter, you are not just holding change, you are holding a piece of living history, one that connects to the artistry of John Flanagan, the legacy of George Washington, the strength of the American economy, and the culture of a nation that values both tradition and progress. This coin's story is not just about numismatics, but about America itself, and that is what makes it so captivating. Imagine holding a piece of American history right in the palm of your hand, a small silver-colored coin that represents more than just 25 cents. It is a symbol of a nation, its traditions, its artistry, and its enduring legacy. The Washington quarter of 1996 is not merely a circulating coin, it is a chapter in the long story of American numismatics. A story that begins in the 1930s when the United States Mint was preparing to honor the bicentennial of the birth of George Washington back. In 1932, the country was searching for a way to pay tribute to the first president of the United States, George Washington, the man who led the Revolutionary Army to victory and who became the face of American leadership and democracy. The Treasury Department and the Commission of Fine Arts began the process of selecting a design that would represent Washington on the coinage that everyday citizens would use for generations. The quarter denomination was chosen since it was one of the most heavily used coins in circulation. The final design selected was that of sculptor John Flanagan, who created a portrait of Washington that conveyed strength, dignity, and timeless leadership. The Washington quarter was introduced into circulation in 1932, and it quickly became a cornerstone of American coinage. Over the decades, it underwent slight modifications, but the portrait of Washington by Flanagan remained dominant. Its production carried through the decades of the Great Depression world. War II, the economic boom of the 1950s, and the turbulent times of the 1960s and 70s. Each quarter carried the story of its own year of minting, reflecting the social, political, and economic landscape of the United States. By the time 1996 arrived, the Washington quarter had been in circulation for 64 years. The year 1996 marked a transitional period for the United States Mint and for the Washington quarter itself. It was the final stretch before the launch of the monumental 50-state quarters program, which would begin in 1999 and completely revolutionize the way Americans viewed their coinage. The 1996 Washington quarter, therefore, stands as one of the last standard issues of the traditional Flanagan design before the new era of state-specific designs captured the imagination of millions. The 1996 Washington quarter was struck at three primary locations: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. The Philadelphia Mint coins bore no mint mark, while the Denver coins carried the familiar D mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint produced proof issues with the S mint mark. Collectors often seek out examples from each mint because they represent the full range of 1996 issues. The proof versions in particular, struck with a mirror-like finish on highly polished planchets, showcase the artistry of the design in a way circulation strikes simply cannot. Looking closer at the coin itself, we see the obverse bearing the left-facing bust of George Washington, sculpted by John Flanagan. The word liberty arches across the top. The phrase, "In God we trust," rests to the left, and the date, 1996, sits just beneath Washington's portrait. On the reverse side, the majestic bald eagle spreads its wings, clutching arrows of strength and surrounded by olive branches of peace. Above the eagle, the words United States of America and E pluribus unum declare the national identity, while quarter dollar is inscribed below. This design had remained relatively unchanged since its introduction, offering Americans a sense of continuity and familiarity for more than half a century. The mintage of the 1996 Washington quarter was substantial, with hundreds of millions of coins struck between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, making it a common issue in circulation. However, the true value of the 1996 quarter, in numismatic terms, lies in its condition, high-grade mint state examples. Particularly those graded MS-67 or higher are considerably scarce and highly sought after by collectors. While an ordinary circulated 1996 quarter might only be worth its face value or slightly above pristine uncirculated specimens with sharp details and no wear, can command significant premiums at auction. The San Francisco proof issues also hold a special place in the story of the 1996 quarter. These proofs were struck with extraordinary care using polished dies and specially prepared planchets, resulting in coins with sharp frosted devices and mirror-like. Fields collectors who pursue proof sets from 1996 treasure these coins as part of the larger annual sets produced by the Mint. These proof quarters are not typically found in circulation, but rather sold directly to collectors, making them a more refined part of the numismatic landscape. Another important aspect of the 1996 Washington quarter is the role it played in bridging two eras of American coinage. On one hand, it represents the long-standing design tradition of the Washington quarter, series which had dominated the denomination since 1932. On the other hand, it was among the final issues before the advent of the 50-state quarters program, which began in 1999 and dramatically changed collecting habits in the United States. Millions of Americans who had never before cared about coins suddenly became engaged in collecting quarters from each state, sparking a nationwide revival in coin collecting. The 1996 quarter, therefore, is seen as one of the last of the classic quarters. Before this explosion of public interest, historically speaking, 1996 was also a significant year in the United States. The nation was in the midst of the Clinton presidency. The economy was strong and the country was preparing to enter a new millennium. The coins minted during this time, including the Washington quarter of 1996, are tiny time capsules of that era. They circulated through the pockets of Americans who were living through technological change, the growth of the internet, and a sense of optimism about the future. When you hold a 1996 quarter today, you are holding a reminder of that moment in history. Collectors and historians alike pay attention not only to the mintage numbers and mint marks, but also to varieties and errors. Errors, such as off-center strikes, double dies, or planche flaws, can dramatically increase the value and intrigue of a 1996 quarter. While most coins struck that year were standard circulation strikes, a few error coins escaped the mint and now command strong premiums among specialists. For collectors, this adds another layer of fascination to the 1996 quarter, since finding one of these rare varieties can be both exciting and rewarding. The Washington Quarter series overall had already cemented itself as one of the longest-running coin series in American history. By 1996, it had survived transitions in minting technology, the removal of silver content in 1965, and the gradual introduction of clad coinage. The coin had moved from being a silver piece of real intrinsic value to a copper-nickel-clad piece whose worth was symbolic rather than metallic. Yet its role in American commerce and culture remained strong, and its image of Washington continued to be instantly recognizable. Across the nation, if we consider the artistry and symbolism of the coin, we see deeper meaning in its design. Washington's stern yet composed portrait reflects ideals of leadership, unity, and perseverance, while the eagle on the reverse recalls both strength and peace. The design choices made by Flanagan in 1932 remained relevant decades later, still resonating with Americans who saw these coins every day in their change. The 1996 quarter, therefore, was not just a coin, it was a work of art produced on a massive scale, a democratic art form that passed through the hands of millions. In conclusion, the 1996 Washington quarter stands as a meaningful artifact within the larger timeline of American coinage. It represents the continuation of a beloved design, the transition toward a new era of collecting, and a reflection of the American experience in the mid-1990s. For collectors, it offers opportunities to appreciate condition, rarity, and proof quality. For historians, it offers a window into the values and priorities of the United States at that time. And for everyday people, it remains a reminder that even the smallest coins in our pockets carry stories that stretch back generations.